Calliope's Tale by FalcolmReynolds. Chapter 6. Growth. She dozed, waking and falling asleep several times, drifting in and out of consciousness. The ship beneath her rocked comfortingly. Several times when she awoke, she heard Calliope singing quietly. Ianthe had been moved from the crew hold into the private quarters, where no one would bother her, and Calliope could see her. The first time, Miculo was pacing back and forth while Calliope hummed. The music wasn't normal. Ianthe could hear the fear in her small voice, and heard the thunder above threatening to shake the boat apart. "It's all right," Miculo said, when the mermaid called for him, sinking under the water's surface to peer out with only her eyes. He hurried over and knelt next to her chest, putting one hand into the water for her to hold on to. "It'll be okay. Don't worry." Ianthe heard him singing gently to Calliope to calm her in the storm. She was not awake to know if it worked. Ianthe remained asleep for several days, but was determined not to allow herself to be down for too long. She forced herself up on the third day and out onto the deck, still shaky and bearing jagged black burns from the lightning. They had broken free of the storm and sailed south, away from Alizarin, and had managed to lose him in the open ocean. More importantly, they knew where they were, just north of a collection of warm, lightly populated islands. They could stop there for supplies, to trade, and to get news. Ianthe checked the horizon through her spyglass. No ships followed them. No dark sails crested over the waves. Calliope's vocabulary expanded at a rapid pace, fueled in part by the books Miculo read to her whenever he wasn't with the crew. "She just eats them up," he told Ianthe, as they stood in the quarters, after setting the midnight sun on a course south, and added hurriedly, "Not physically, but she gets the words. Faster than I could, that's for sure. And she understands the context, and if she doesn't, she asks me about it." He shook his head. "It's astonishing." "Astonishing," Calliope parroted from the chest, and then said, "I can hear you." Miculo froze, eyes wide. Calliope laughed. "You're talking about me?" "Yes," Ianthe said immediately, unsure of how else to respond. "We are." "Why?" She had to think about that one. "You know, I don't have an answer either," Miculo said into the silence. I'm amazed at how fast you're learning." It was weird to speak directly to her when so recently she had only been able to make toddler sounds. Maybe she'd been this smart all along, and only now understood how to use human speech instead of whatever the mare had spoken. How smart would she eventually get? They had to move her out of the chest. She got far too large for it. They nailed a lifeboat to the floor in the hold and built higher sides on it, and filled it with seawater. "Normally," Ianthe heard a younger crew member named Kieran say to Aisha as they carried a bucket down the stairs, "we take the seawater off the boat. Now we bring it on the boat." "Normally, we don't have a mermaid in the hold," Aisha said, shaking her head. She spotted Ianthe looking and tried to hide her smile. Even with her new tub, though, she was still antsy. "Why can't I go in the ocean?" she asked repeatedly to Miculo, while he stood next to his desk and rubbed his forehead. "It isn't safe," he explained, turning to face her. "There are still too many creatures there that will kill and eat you." "I'm fine," Calliope insisted, squeezing the edge of the tub. "I'd be fine. I can rip a shark apart with my bare hands." "Can you?" Ianthe asked in the following silence. Calliope shrugged. "Probably," she said. "I've never had a chance to try." They let her go in the ocean. They made her wait for weeks after transferring tubs, but they gave in eventually. She was practically vibrating with excitement when Ianthe carried her over to the lifeboat and sat in it with her while it lowered it down to the ocean's surface. She was large as a child, or perhaps 8 or 9, and far heavier than one, but Ianthe still found herself able to lift and carry her without too much trouble. "Be careful," she cautioned, hard in her throat, as they touched down against the ocean surface. "If you see anything dangerous, come back immediately and we'll protect you." They were moored off the coast of a rocky island, and in the clear blue waters with coral shimmering underneath like an oil painting. The blurs and smudges of color and shadow caught Ianthe's gaze as she searched the reef below for threats. There were none. She took a breath. "All right," she said to Calliope, and let go of her, letting her splay haphazardly in the lifeboat's seat. "Go ahead." Calliope, without hesitation, grabbed the edge of the boat, pulling herself closer, and flipped over the rail, splashing into the water. Ianthe couldn't stop herself from leaning over the edge to see where the mermaid went, and saw her vanish down underneath the boat. Her dark form disappeared instantly into the clear water, darting away over the colorful ocean floor. For a few terrifying minutes, there was silence. And then, in a flash of deep brown, the boat rocked again and Calliope popped up. Water streamed from her hair and her dark eyes gleamed. "It's wonderful," she said, grinning with those brilliantly sharp teeth. "Beautiful. Also, I found this." She tossed an octopus into the boat. Ianthe jumped at that and stared at the octopus. It was alive and stared right back at her, oozing gently over the planks. "Oh," she said. "I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with this." "Oh, I just thought it looked pretty," Calliope replied, leaning on the edge of the boat and tipping it dangerously to one side. "Isn't it?" It was a deep reddish pink at the moment, but as Ianthe watched, it changed to a dark brown and squished itself against the wood of the lifeboat. "Whoa!" Calliope said, eyes wide. "I didn't know it could do that. Can I do that?" "Probably not," Ianthe told her. She racked her mind to see if this specific type of octopus was dangerous. She couldn't remember. Damn. Language, Ianthe thought, and didn't bother saying it out loud. She watched Calliope reach over and grab the octopus. It clung with its suckers to the boat for a second, but couldn't resist Calliope's swift tug, then retreated into the waters and vanished once again. She loved the ocean. Every opportunity she got, she found her way back into the sea. The tub in the hold was no longer enough to satisfy her. She accepted that she needed it for journeys and for the dangerous nights or storms, but wished she were strong enough to stay in the sea. The crew used to dive for mussels for her. Now she found them on her own, whenever they were near a shore. She pried them off the rocks with her bare hands, stronger than any human Ianthe had ever met. "So," she said one day from her tub, "you're my family." Ianthe paused. "Yes," she said cautiously. "Why do you have pictures on your skin and I don't?" "Tattoos." Ianthe glanced down, where a wave curled over her arm and hand, seafoam on the crust, scraping over her knuckles, matching the scars she'd gotten from a fight with a crewmate some years prior. Oh, these aren't natural." "How'd you get them?" "Someone has to tattoo you," Ianthe explained. "It takes skill and practice, and someone has to make it for you." Calliope paused. "Why don't I have any?" "You haven't asked?" Ianthe said, and paused. "We never even thought of that. You were too young before." "I want one," Calliope said firmly. Ianthe opened her mouth to argue, but she'd gotten her first tattoo before she'd even gotten on a ship, so who was she to refuse such a request? We'll see." "That means no," Calliope muttered, and sank down into the water. Ianthe relented. "Oh, all right, fine," she said, and Calliope looked up, grinning. They docked at another port town, Cape Chilleret, and stayed there for a few days, trading things they'd found in the sea for things found only on land and gathering information. Calliope convinced them to let her stay off the ship, in the bay, hiding beneath the docks and staying out of sight. She enjoyed it anyway. Ianthe told her she couldn't let anyone see her. It was too dangerous, but caught her showing off a couple times to the children from the port, surprising them when they stood next to the water's edge and the rocks or threw pebbles into the water. They stayed there for a few days. Calliope, at this point, was much larger than she had been the first time she'd been allowed in the sea. Easily the size of a young human, perhaps a teenager, with a 2-meter tail. And she was curious. Not always about things that had answers that Ianthe wanted to give. "Why am I really here?" she asked Ianthe one night, as she drifted in the water at the edge of the dock, leaning on it next to Ianthe. The setting sun pooled like liquid metal in the troughs of the swells, and Ianthe looked away from Calliope. "I asked Father, and he told me the story he always does, that you found me drifting through the waves, alone on a bed of kelp, that you think my mother was sick and fell to illness, building something to keep me afloat before slipping beneath the surface of the sea." She paused and took a breath. "Is that true? Is that really true?" Ianthe took a breath to lie and couldn't. There was no point. No. Calliope watched her carefully, silent. "We didn't know," Ianthe finally said, exhaling in a gust of wind. "We didn't know any better. We were just trying to get to shore, to get water. There was a matron. She would not let us pass. We didn't know that she guarded something. We didn't understand that what she guarded was 1,000 times more priceless than the purest gold." Calliope looked down and picked at the salt-stained boards, twisting her mouth into a frown. Her eyes were almost blocked by the black puff of hair tied back with a scrap of white linen. "I see," she said. "So you fought her?" "We killed her. We didn't know. We couldn't know." There was a long moment. Ianthe forced herself to look at the mermaid, to see the inevitable distaste and distrust. But when she did look, there was no malice in her eyes. "I guess," Calliope said with a sigh. She leaned on the dock, folding her hands over each other. On one of them, the curling tentacles of a kraken swirled around her fingers, stemming from an armored beast that spread its arms over her shoulders and down her back. "You know, I don't think I would have liked my other life as much." Ianthe smiled.